Hey everyone, welcome to the Taskbeasts podcast. Today we have Usman Sheikh, who I've been working together for about 1.5 or 2 years now. He runs High Output Ventures. He's angel invested in the Asian region for a while. And we're here to talk about some of his experiences using some of these processes that are at the foundation of the Taskbeasts model.
All right. Thanks for inviting me over, Ken. Excited to share my journey because I think my journey is very atypical of either a founder or someone who runs a company, which is that when we come up with an idea and if we can't execute it ourselves, my default was to always hire someone to full-time to get the job done. And then we would run the usual model of setting up goals, getting it done, tracking metrics, and all of that. I think when I started working with you, what was very different was that instead of hiring full-time staff, we sort of got started much faster with freelancers. And I think that was the biggest sort of switch from how I used to work on new projects versus how we work now.
One part of the Beast method is that everything is a task in this ClickUp, which is a project management system, and the freelancers update the tasks. So I know you're following some of these tasks. How has been your experience? Is it information overload? Maybe just talk a little bit about how that's been.
Back in the day when I would be getting work sort of tested out and see okay, I need to get XYZ sort of checked up whether this person has done this work. The only component that I would have was metrics. I would look at metrics and see whether this has been hit, this has not been hit, and things like that. I think the granularity as to what was the work done behind that was the gap that was missing. And now that I've been using this method on a couple of projects. I'm in it. I get tagged on certain tasks. So I can see with a lot more granularity as to what someone is doing, what the output looks like, which is contributing to the metrics, which I believe in the earlier stages of a company is very valuable because you can actually see who's working, who's not working, who's contributing, who's not contributing, which is quite difficult when you abstract up.
Yeah, this is something that I've found is important when working with freelancers, just because you kind of have to manage the inputs to some extent. So the philosophy of the task piece is that we give you a lot of these granular inputs, but generally it becomes not too time intensive to just kind of sift through it and steer if you want.
Yeah, I think ClickUp has also been I feel the tool that you're using and putting this through, the inbox tool. I use Superhuman for email, and I'm actually very used to the keyboard shortcuts and quickly getting through that. So I look at that as another inbox, which is work, but I think I don't need to ask anyone about what's happening. Because once I go through that inbox and I click through the cards, I get an immediate overview as to what someone did, what's happening. And then my conversations are a lot more structured and focused on the core thing when I'm speaking to people when I do.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that we've found, and part of the philosophy behind this, is that the clients can, micro steer if they want. So they see the progress that is being done on something that they asked for. If they see that it's going in a direction that they don't want, they can comment and say, hey, no, you actually. So this way that we don't go too far down something that they're maybe not happy with.
And it might seem like this method is very micromanagey from the outside. But I think it only becomes micromanaging when you get into things or you start telling people how to do their work versus how they're doing it without too much context. I think that's the bad manager. If someone is designing something and you're telling them to how to do their job, either you are an expert designer, which I feel most founders are not experts in everything. And I think that's when it becomes micromanaging. But I think the value of feedback to output is extremely valuable to the person who's delivering the output, because they actually don't really get that on a granular level in a stand-up where they might flash 5 things in front of you and then you just cursory give them sort of like feedback. Whereas in this way, it's far more intentional in how it's structured.
Also, one thing that we position to the clients is that we give them this chief outsourcing officer, which is usually either myself or my partner. And so that they have a single point of contact that is not purely a freelancer, who's kind of their project manager to make sure everything is on track. So maybe how has that been for you, and any word of advice there?
I think for our TechZ project that we work on together, that's a good example of this. We had several writers and people doing videos and things like that. There were a lot of moving parts in that sort of like project. And I really sort of like got my, input from you. I could see the website. I got the emails every day. And that really helped abstract a lot of that up, because for me, I wasn't getting tagged on every article. That was also something that you had set up and distributed. So I think it frees up the time of a partner or the founder to actually focus on the main thing, which usually at the start of any business is getting sales, getting, that customer experience just right, or getting the efficiency part is taken care of, which I feel like is a critical part. And yeah, that was one example of working with a single point who you explain your vision to, they execute it all, and then you actually get feedback as to whether you were on the right path or not. I think the responsibility of that falls back to the founder.
Yeah. And part of why we do this, so one thing we've heard from folks that have outsourced before is that they've tested offshoring or outsourcing agencies, and, they're paying by hour or for the work done, but they felt like, okay, they were just billing time, but like nobody was really taking responsibility for the quality of the work on a granular basis. And so with our chief outsourcing officer, you have someone that kind of serves almost like a part of your management team that you can just communicate with and say, hey, this is what I need. This is the quality level I need. And then we essentially manage that. And therefore, like, you're not left managing all these freelancers directly. So it sounds like that's worked.
If I was to start a new sort of like business today, and I only do sort of like remote anyways, so I now strongly sort of like think that we get to validation with a group of freelancers, which we can define budgets for. We can say, okay, this is how much I want to spend. This is the output that I want to get out of this. And then we can validate from there. And I think that works so much better than the traditional way, which is put up a job, try to get one generalist sort of like person who can do a whole bunch of things, and then overly rely on that person with very little redundancy. And most of the time when you get one person to do 4 tasks, they're not going to be the best at it. So your output is also going to be subpar. Most people, including myself, have stayed away from hiring 4 freelancers because of the overhead of hiring them, filtering through all of them, getting that done, and then tracking their work and all of that. So I think with all of that complexity taken care of, well, it's far superior as an alternative to get started. And in certain parts of your business which are scaling, to also scale with it.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you very much for your inputs today.
All right. Thanks, Ken.